Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to be honest with you. Usually when I prep for these conversations, I have a pretty good idea of the lane we're going to be in.
Right.
We're doing a deep dive on tech or the economy or a specific legal case. But today,
Yeah.
the source material we have is just, it's all over the map. And I mean that in the most intense way possible.
It really is a bit of everything. It's not one single thread. We're looking at a transcript that covers, you've got missing persons in the desert, biological warfare agents in a house in Las Vegas, historic crime statistics, the Second Amendment, and even the internal culture of the FBI itself. It is a lot to digest.
A lot. And the source here is an interview that just happened. We're talking February 2026 between Fox News anchor Bret Baier and the current FBI director, Kash Patel. And what struck me right out of the gate was the pace.
Oh, absolutely.
This wasn't Bret Baier lobbing softballs. This was a lightning round. He was just jumping from one massive topic to the next, and Patel was firing back just as fast.
It felt less like a standard, sit-down interview and more like a State of the Union for federal law enforcement.
That's a great way to put it.
And you're right about the pace. Usually FBI directors are so cautious. They speak in legalese, they dodge, they pivot. But here we saw a director who was very eager to define exactly what the Bureau is doing right now.
And maybe more importantly, what it isn't doing.
That's the key. That's the whole thing.
That's the key, isn't it? What they aren't doing. Because as we went through this transcript, a theme started to emerge for me. And it's not just about the specific cases, though we are absolutely going to talk about the Epstein files, the assassination attempt in Butler, the biolabs, all of it. It's about the philosophy. There was a very specific Patel doctrine emerging here, a doctrine about federal power versus state power.
And that really is the mission for this deep dive. We have to decode that language. We need to understand how Director Patel is drawing these boundary lines.
Right.
Because in some cases, he's saying the FBI is hands-off. We defer to the locals. We bow to them. And in other cases, he's saying we are kicking down the door.
And understanding why he chooses one path over the other.
Yeah.
That's crucial. I think it's crucial to understanding the current state of American justice.
And then there's the whole other layer, the crust factor. You can feel it running through the entire interview.
It's this constant tension.
Yes. Between Patel claiming absolute total transparency.
We're the most transparent ever.
Right. And then you have the public's, lingering skepticism, whether it's the Epstein files or the Butler shooter. He's up there saying, we've shown you everything. And you can almost hear the public saying, no, you haven't. We don't believe you.
It's the defining tension of modern governance, I think. But we're going to try and cut through that noise. We aren't here to take sides. We're not here to sensationalize. We are just going to look at exactly what was said, the specific words he used, and the legal reality behind them.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's jump right into the first segment. This is where that philosophy of power we mentioned really comes into focus. Baier starts by asking about a missing person case in Arizona, the Guthrie case.
Right. And this is a case that's gotten a lot of national attention. It's all over the news. You have a missing individual, potentially abducted, out in the Arizona desert. It has all the hallmarks of a major federal case.
Absolutely. Kidnapping, potentially crossing state lines.
So the natural question from the public and from Baier is the FBI taking over? Are the feds coming in to save the day?
And that's usually the expectation, right? That's what you see in the movies. The local cops are stumped, and then the black SUVs roll in.
Exactly. But Patel's answer was fascinating. He used a very, very specific term. He said the local sheriff and the state authorities are on the X.
On the X? I had to pause when I read that. It's not typical bureaucratic language.
No, it's not. I paused the recording, too, when I read it in the transcript because it is such a deliberate choice of words. That is military vernacular.
From special ops, right?
Special operations, tactical law enforcement. Being on the X means you are the person at the objective. You're the one at the point of danger. You are the one kicking in the door, making the split-second decisions, taking the heat. You are the protagonist of the story.
So by calling the sheriff the one on the X, what is he really signaling? What's the subtext there?
He is signaling a strict, unambiguous hierarchy. He's saying the sheriff is the commander here. We, the FBI, are the support staff.
Wow.
It is a complete inversion of that typical trope where the FBI Bigfoots the local police. He's explicitly stating that the local elected official, the sheriff, is the primary authority, not the federal agent.
He went even further than that. He said the FBI provides all resources requested. But then he added this little phrase, in any manner they choose.
Yes.
That phrasing, in any manner they choose, it really stuck out to me. It sounds like he is walking on eggshells to avoid stepping on any local toes.
It is a philosophy of federalism in action. He's trying to rebrand the FBI. I mean, for a long time, there has been this resentment, especially in rural and in certain state law enforcement agencies, that the feds swoop in, they take the credit, they ignore local expertise, and then they leave. Patel is correcting for that. He's saying, we have the labs, we have the tech, we have the money, we have the manpower. You tell us what you need and we will give it to you. But we are not taking your case.
And he holds that line even when Baer brings up the ransom note.
Right, which is a big deal.
A huge deal. TMZ reported that a ransom note was received. That usually triggers federal kidnapping statutes automatically.
Okay.
That's the FBI's music.
It is. That's the tripwire for federal jurisdiction. But Patel doesn't bite?
Not at all. He acknowledges they're aware, he says they're assisting, but he immediately pivots right back to supporting the locals. The sheriff is on the X.
Because politically, and I think philosophically for this administration, he wants the FBI to be seen as a partner, not an overlord. It helps build trust with local agencies, which is something the Bureau has struggled with, especially in red states. It's a very deliberate strategy.
Okay. But then, and this is where, my head started to spin a little bit, we get a completely different scenario just a few minutes later in the interview. Baer brings up the Fullerton County election case.
And suddenly the whole defer to the locals philosophy, it just vanishes.
Completely gone. In Fullerton County, the FBI didn't just offer support. They didn't just provide resources. They executed a search warrant. They seized ballots from a warehouse. This wasn't on the X support. This was direct, overwhelming federal intervention.
The contrast is so stark, it's almost jarring. In Arizona, they are standing back, being deferential. In Fullerton, they are taking charge.
So the question is, why? How does he possibly justify that difference?
Well, he lays out a very strict procedural defense. It's very lawyerly. He doesn't talk about local partners here at all. He talks about the federal magistrate judge.
That's his shield. That's the word he keeps coming back to.
It is. He walks Baer and the audience through the steps, almost like it's a civics lesson. Evidence collection, presentation of that evidence to a federal judge, a finding of probable cause by that judge, and then the issuance of a search warrant.
So he's arguing this wasn't a discretionary choice to Bigfoot anyone. He's framing it as a legal necessity.
Exactly. He's saying, our hands were tied. The evidence pointed to a federal crime, a judge agreed, and we were legally obligated to act. It takes the decision out of his hands politically.
But here is the catch. And this is what makes it so frustrating for you listening at home. We don't know what that crime is.
We have no idea.
Baer presses him on it. He asks very directly, is the probable cause regarding election tabulation? And what does Patel say?
That is under seal.
Under seal. It sounds so official, so final. But what does that actually mean for us, for the public trying to understand what happened?
When a warrant, or more importantly, the affidavit supporting the warrant is sealed, it means the court has ordered that the contents cannot be made public.
And why would they do that?
Usually it's done for a few reasons. It could be to protect an ongoing investigation, so you don't tip off other suspects. It could be to protect the reputation of people who are named in the warrant but haven't been charged with a crime yet. Or it could be to ensure witnesses don't get spooked and change their stories.
But in a case involving an election, which is arguably the most sensitive, most explosive topic in American life right now, that secrecy, it just creates a vacuum.
It's a massive one. And that vacuum gets filled with speculation and conspiracy theories from both sides. We know that the FBI took the ballots. We know a judge signed off on it. But we don't know why.
And because it's sealed, Patel can't tell us or won't tell us. So we're stuck in this gray zone where we just have to trust that the probable cause was legitimate without being allowed to see it for ourselves.
And that whole trust us dynamic, it gets even more complicated. I mean, way more complicated when you look at the phone call incident that happened during that raid. This detail was just, it was absolutely wild.
The New York Times reported on this. So while the FBI agents are in the warehouse, they're in the middle of executing this warrant, seizing these ballots.
Yeah.
The director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, calls President Trump. And then, and I still can't quite believe this actually happened, she puts the president on speakerphone with the agents on the scene.
Just try to visualize that scene for a second. You are an FBI agent.
Yeah.
You're executing a high-stress, politically sensitive warrant on election materials, probably in a tense environment, and suddenly the voice of the President of the United States comes booming out of a speakerphone.
Baer called it unusual, which that feels like the understatement of the year.
It is profoundly unusual. I mean, for the last 50 years since all the post-Watergate reforms, the absolute standard operating procedure has been a strict, thick firewall between the White House and active criminal investigations.
To avoid even the appearance of political influence.
Precisely. The idea is that the president shouldn't be directing or even appearing to influence specific field operations. Having the president essentially in the room via speakerphone, it just shatters that norm. It vaporizes it.
But Patel defends it. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't try to minimize it or say it was a mistake. He leans right into it.
He reframes it entirely. He flips the script. He argues that previous administrations were too distant, maybe too critical of law enforcement. He frames this call not as interference,
but as morale boosting.
Morale boosting.
Yeah.
He says the president was just back in the blue, saying thank you to the men and women on the ground doing the hard work.
He was very, very careful to note that Trump didn't give any orders. He didn't say, look in that box over there, or make sure you find X. He just said thanks.
And that is the very fine, very technical nuance that Patel is hanging his entire hat on.
It's a fine line.
It is. He's distinguishing between substantive interference, telling them what to do, and what he would call cultural support. To Patel and this administration, this is a leader supporting his troops. To critics, it's a dangerous blurring of the lines that suggests the FBI is operating as a political arm of the White House rather than an independent body of justice.
It really highlights a massive shift in organizational culture. I mean, this is not your grandfather's FBI, where that J. Edgar Hoover-style independence was seen as the highest virtue.
No.
This is an FBI that seems to value alignment with the administration.
Precisely. And that alignment, that new culture, brings us right to the next section of the interview, where the administration's priorities collide with some very old, very dark secrets.
The cold cases, the conspiracy theories. Let's talk about the Epstein files.
The topic that just never goes away. And honestly, it shouldn't, given the sheer gravity of the crimes involved.
Patel starts this section by claiming a major victory. The DOJ and FBI under this administration have been the most transparent in history regarding these files. He's taking a victory lap right at the beginning.
He absolutely is. He's saying, look, we did it. We released the documents. We did what everyone was asking for years.
But, and this is a massive but, he then drops a detail that completely changes the entire context of that claim. He says the released materials were confined to search warrants from 2007, 2008, and earlier.
I am so glad you caught that, because that is the critical caveat. That is the fine print. Listeners really need to understand the timeline here. 2007 and 2008.
That's ancient history in investigative terms.
It's nearly 20 years ago. That was the era of the original highly controversial investigation in Palm Beach, Florida, the one that resulted in that non-prosecution agreement that was so widely criticized.
So if you, the listener, are scrolling through these newly released PDFs hoping to find flight logs from 2015, or evidence of meetings that happened in New York in 2012, or names from, the last decade,
you are looking in the wrong place. Those documents literally cannot exist in this particular release because they fall completely outside the scope of the original warrants that were executed back in 2008.
So Patel is explaining, very lawyerly again, that he is bound by the four corners of the original investigation. He can't release what wasn't collected in the first place.
Right. His argument is basically, we opened the box that was sealed in 2008 and showed you everything inside. Don't be mad at us if the things you're looking for weren't put in the box back then.
He also points out that 3 previous FBI administrations looked at this same material. His argument is basically, we squeezed this lemon dry, there's no juice left, we released what we legally could. If you're disappointed, don't blame us. Blame the fact that the original case was so limited in scope.
It is the fundamental tension between public expectation and bureaucratic reality. The public wants the list. They want this global web of connections right up to the present day. The FBI is saying, we have a stack of dusty boxes from 2008. Here they are. Those are two vastly different things.
And then Baer presses him on the ultimate question, the one that fuels all the skepticism, all the theories. Did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself?
And Patel didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. He said yes.
Baer followed up. He asked 100%. And Patel just said, yes, sir.
Unwavering.
That surprised me a little. I have to admit, Patel has positioned himself as this outsider, this disruptor, someone who's willing to question the official narrative on everything else. But on this point, the single most controversial death in federal custody in modern history, he is towing the company line completely, no daylight whatsoever.
It suggests that there are limits to his disruption. He's signaling that he has reviewed the evidence, the autopsy, the internal investigations, and he trusts the findings of the medical examiners and the previous investigators. He's essentially telling the conspiracy theorists, stop looking here, this door is closed, move on.
But for a lot of people, that door will never be closed. Just like the door on the Butler shooter case will never be truly closed for many, the assassination attempt on President Trump.
This is another instance where the official story, as it's been presented, feels incomplete to the public. It just doesn't add up for a lot of folks.
Baer points out that we are months and months past the event. This interview is looking back at the attack in May 2025, and we still don't have what he calls a robust picture of the shooter.
Which is strange.
It's very strange. The shooter is deceased. Usually in these cases, the FBI releases a massive file. We know who they ate lunch with in 3rd grade. But here we have missing cell phone data, we have missing contacts. It feels like there's a black hole in the middle of the story.
And Patel's defense here is really interesting. He doesn't try to fill in the blanks. He uses what I would call the volume defense.
The volume defense, I like that.
He says, we gave Congress 40,000 pages of documents. He emphasizes that number. And he frames it as a 400% increase over what his predecessor, Director Wray, would have shared.
40,000 pages. I mean, it's hard to even conceptualize that. That is a mountain of paper.
It is, but as any investigator or journalist knows, quantity does not equal quality. It's the classic data dump.
You can have 40,000 pages of witness statements, ballistics reports, financial records, bureaucratic memos, and still not have the one piece of evidence, the one text message, the one email that explains why he did it or who he was connected to.
And sometimes providing that much data is a way of obscuring the truth, not revealing it. You're hiding the needle in a haystack of your own making.
Patel actually had a moment of real candor here, I thought. He looked at Baer and he said, it's never going to be enough for everyone.
He knows he's fighting a losing battle on the public trust front. He knows that because the shooter is dead and can't speak for himself, and because the digital footprint is muddy, there will always be a void.
And in the age of the internet, voids get filled with speculation. Immediately.
It's that trust us dilemma all over again. The FBI says, we looked everywhere. We gave you all the paper. We turned over every rock. We found nothing.
But if the public doesn't trust the institution to begin with, the absence of evidence doesn't look like a dead end. It looks like a cover-up. Exactly.
Yeah.
Transparency is only effective if the audience believes you aren't holding anything back. Patel is betting that by drowning Congress in 40,000 pages, he can prove he's not hiding anything. But for the person at home who just wants to know who did the shooter talk to that morning, a stack of paper isn't a real answer.
Not at all.
Okay, let's pivot from those big, almost unanswerable questions to a topic that affects people's daily lives a bit more directly. The Second Amendment. There was a fascinating exchange here about guns, protests, and the very definition of violence.
This was a legal masterclass in how to thread a needle on a very, very sharp political issue.
So set the sense for you. We have protests happening. We have people bringing firearms to these protests, exercising their Second Amendment rights as they see them. In Washington, D.C., the U.S. attorney, a guy named Pirro, took a super hardline stance.
An extremely hardline stance.
He basically said, on the record, if you bring a gun into the district, you're going to jail. Full stop. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Which, to be fair to U.S. Attorney Pirro, is the local law in D.C. It is one of the strictest jurisdictions in the country regarding firearms. It's what's called a strict liability jurisdiction. If you have it and you aren't supposed to, you are guilty. The intent doesn't matter as much.
But Patel, speaking from the federal level, takes a much broader, much more nuanced view.
A very different view.
He starts by planting his flag. He claims this administration is the most pro-Second Amendment in history. That's the headline. But then he adds a condition, a conjunction, that changes everything.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He says you cannot bring a firearm and incite violence.
That one little word, "and," is doing a ton of heavy lifting in that sentence. He is drawing a bright line. He is distinguishing between the tool, the firearm, and the action inciting violence.
So why is that distinction so critical from an enforcement perspective?
Because it signals a massive shift in enforcement priorities for the FBI. Patel is saying that the FBI isn't interested in sweeping up law-abiding gun owners on technical possession charges. If you are standing there peacefully with a firearm on your hip where it's legal to do so, He seems to be implying the FBI doesn't care. They're not looking for you. But the
Well,
moment you cross the line, the moment you use that firearm or your words to incite violence or commit a crime, then the federal hammer comes down hard.
it feels like an action-based enforcement strategy versus a status-based one. Is that the fair way to put it?
That is a perfect way to put it. Puro in D.C. is enforcing status. You possess the gun, therefore you are a criminal. Patel is enforcing action. You use the gun to threaten or you incited a riot while armed, therefore you are a criminal. It's a huge difference.
And it allows him to maintain that Pro-2A branding for the administration, while still drawing a hard line against, rioting or insurrection.
It's a very clever political and legal position. It's a subtle rebuke of the strict local approach, isn't it? Even though they are on the same team of law enforcement, you can see they have very different philosophies on the application of gun rights.
Absolutely. And it sends a clear message to gun owners across the country. We aren't coming for your rights, but don't you dare use those rights to break the peace.
It's a delicate balance.
Okay, before we get to the really explosive stuff about national security, and trust me, it is explosive,
It is.
I want to touch on the Charlie Kirk shooter case. This is a brief part of the interview, but I think it revealed something important about Patel's character and the constraints he's under.
Right. The first thing he does is disclose his relationship. He says Charlie Kirk is a dear friend.
Which is a significant disclosure. It's not just another case for him. He has a personal, emotional investment in this. He's biased, and he's admitting it.
He is. But then when Baer asked him about the evidence, specifically pushing him on the one-shooter theory that's been debated in the media, what does Patel do?
He zips his lip. He just completely shuts down that line of questioning. He refuses to comment.
And he explains why. He says it's a state murder charge. The trial is ongoing. It's happening right now.
And this is a really important little mini lesson in judicial integrity for the public.
It really is.
Imagine for a second if the director of the FBI went on national television and said, "Oh yeah, the evidence we've seen clearly shows it was just one gunman." What happens the next morning?
The next morning, the defense attorney for that shooter would be in court filing a motion for a mistrial. Immediately.
They'd argue the entire jury pool was tainted.
Of course. They would argue that the most powerful law enforcement officer in the federal government, the biggest authority in the land, is putting his thumb on the scale of a local trial. It could completely ruin the prosecution's case. It could lead to the guy walking free on a technicality.
So by saying nothing, by showing that restraint, Patel is actually protecting the prosecution of his friend's alleged killer.
He explicitly said it. He said, the worst thing that could happen is a mistrial or acquittal because of something he says on TV. So despite his personal feelings, despite it being his dear friend, he is prioritizing the integrity of the court process over the media's desire for a scoop or his own desire to, shape the narrative.
It shows a level of discipline that, frankly, not all public figures have these days.
It really does. It shows he understands the immense weight of his words.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Because we are about to head into the segment that felt like it was ripped straight out of a Tom Clancy novel or like a techno-thriller movie script.
You mean the biolabs?
The biolabs.
Right.
Baer brings up a raid that happened just 48 hours before this interview was recorded. FBI agents in Las Vegas raided a house, a regular residential house in a regular neighborhood, and removed 1,000 suspected biological agents.
Just stop and visualize that for a second. You're in a suburban neighborhood in Vegas. Maybe you're watering your lawn. And suddenly there are guys in full level 4 hazmat suits pulling crate after crate out of your neighbor's house.
1,000 vials. Not 10, not 50. 1,000.
It's a terrifying thought.
And the connection here is the truly scary part. This house, this stash of biological agents, is linked to a Chinese national who is accused of operating that underground biolab in Reedley, California, years ago.
I remember that story. The Reedley case was a huge deal back then. This illegal, unlicensed lab just found in the middle of nowhere, full of genetically engineered mice, infectious diseases, weird chemicals. It was a house of horrors.
But here is the kicker, and this is the part I can't wrap my head around. That guy, the operator of the Reedley lab, has been in jail for 3 years.
Right.
So how is his network still operating? Why are we just finding this massive stash in Vegas now?
That is the million-dollar question, and Patel uses this specific mystery, this raid, to launch a blistering direct attack on his predecessor, Christopher Wray.
He didn't pull any punches at all.
Yep.
He said Wray's FBI, back when they investigated Reedley, claimed there was no connection to China.
He essentially said they dismissed it as just some rogue operator.
And Patel, in this interview, calls that conclusion implausible. That's a strong word.
He went further. He called it a state-run investigation, explicitly implying the Chinese state, the CCP, was involved from the beginning. He is essentially accusing the previous FBI leadership of either gross incompetence or worse, willful blindness when it comes to Chinese espionage on U.S. soil.
This is what I was calling the Patel pivot in my notes. He says that this new FBI, under his leadership, went back and looked at the reports that were dismissed years ago.
And that is the key insight for the entire interview, I think. The evidence didn't change. The files were sitting there in a computer system or a file cabinet, but the eyes looking at the files changed.
A new perspective.
A new perspective. Patel's team looked at the same data with a pre-existing hypothesis that the CCP was involved, and lo and behold, they found the link to the Vegas house that the previous team missed or ignored.
It really just goes to show how much leadership and, frankly, political will matters in an investigation. If you aren't looking for a conspiracy, you're almost certainly not going to find one. If you are.
You might find a house full of plague vials in Las Vegas.
And the urgency here is just. It's palpable in the transcript. Patel mentions they shipped these samples overnight to the nation's top labs for analysis. He then immediately links it to another story.
The arrests at the University of Michigan.
Right, the agricultural espionage. 3 researchers with ties to the CCP arrested.
And what were they doing? They were bringing in biologicals, specifically designed to harm the U.S. agricultural seed industry, to attack our food supply.
So when you put those two things together, the 1,000 vials in the Vegas biolab and the seed sabotage plot in Michigan, what picture does that paint for you?
It paints a picture of a coordinated, multi-front biological attack on the United States. Not an attack with missiles or bombs, but a quiet, insidious attack on our food supply and our public health infrastructure. The FBI is weaving these disparate cases into a single, terrifying narrative. The Chinese Communist Party is actively trying to poison the well, both literally and metaphorically.
And Patel is positioning the FBI as the thin line, the shield against this new kind of warfare. It's a major shift from the focus on counterterrorism in the traditional post-9/11 sense.
It's biosecurity and counterespionage against a nation-state adversary.
Exactly. He is defining the new enemy. It's not a guy in a cave in Afghanistan. It's a researcher in a lab coat backed by the full power of a foreign state.
A much more complex threat.
Finally, we have to look at the scoreboard. Because Patel didn't just bring stories to this interview. He brought numbers. And honestly, some of these statistics seemed almost too good to be true. They were eye-popping.
They were staggering. He came armed with a spreadsheet. You could tell he was ready with the data.
He claims a 100% increase in arrests year over year, a doubling, and a 210% increase in gangs and criminal enterprises disrupted.
Let's just dwell on that 210% number for a moment. Right. In the world of law enforcement stats, a 5% increase is a good year. A 10% increase is a great year. Something to brag about. A 210% increase is a statistical anomaly. It suggests a fundamental change in the physics of how the agency operates. It's almost unbelievable.
So how is that operationally possible? I mean, did crime go up by 210%, or did enforcement just get that much more aggressive?
Patel argues it's the enforcement. He talks about a strategic shift he's implemented, moving agents from behind the desk to out in the field.
He put a number on it. He said they put 1,000 agents into the field last year and are planning for 1,000 more to be moved permanently.
And that, right there, is the secret sauce. That's the explanation. The FBI has historically been a very top-heavy organization. Lots of analysts, lots of policy people, lots of management at headquarters in the Hoover building.
A bureaucracy.
A massive bureaucracy. Patel is debureaucratizing the bureau. If you take 1,000 agents who are writing reports and managing cases from a desk and you put them on the street executing search warrants and making arrests, your arrest numbers are naturally going to skyrocket.
It's a shift from intelligence gathering to direct action. From thinking to doing.
Exactly. It's badges on the street. It's a very traditional, very aggressive law and order approach to federal policing.
He also throws out a 20% decrease in murders and a 500% increase in arrests of online predators targeting children. And he credits a lot of this to that phrase again, backing the blue.
He believes that morale is a force multiplier. It's a core part of his leadership philosophy.
What does that mean in practical terms?
His theory is that under previous administrations, agers were hesitant. They were afraid to be aggressive because they felt they wouldn't be supported by Washington if things went wrong, if a raid went bad, or if there was a public backlash.
So they were policing defensively.
Exactly. He's arguing that by having a president who openly supports them, like Trump on that speakerphone call, to bring it full circle, the agents feel empowered. They're taking the handcuffs off themselves and going after criminals more aggressively.
So whether you accept that direct causal link between a phone call and arrest stats or not, you can't argue with the correlation. The activity level of the FBI has spiked dramatically under his watch.
The data tells a story of an agency that is running hot. They are busier, more aggressive, and more focused on street-level results than we have seen in a very, very long time.
Okay, so let's try and tie this all together.
Yeah.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We have the on-the-X philosophy in Arizona versus the kick-down-the-door reality in Fullerton County. We have the transparent but limited approach to the Epstein files, which satisfies no one.
Right.
We have the aggressive, almost zealous hunt for Chinese biolabs. And we have a bureau that is flooding the streets with agents and putting up historic numbers.
It's a portrait of an agency in complete transition. It is fundamentally reshaping its relationship with local police, it's reshaping its relationship with the White House, and it's completely redefining who its primary enemies are.
It leaves me thinking about that final point Patel made, the one about the biolabs. He said they had to go back and look at a report his predecessor dismissed.
That is the thought that lingers for me, too. It raises a really provocative and frankly unsettling question for us as citizens.
What's that?
If the Reedley biolab case wasn't actually closed, if the evidence of a larger conspiracy was there all along, but the previous leadership chose to ignore it or just didn't see it, what else isn't closed? When the FBI says, regarding the Butler shooter or the Epstein files, we looked and found nothing, are we just waiting for the next director, 5 or 10 years from now, to go back and find the connection that was there all along?
That is a powerful and somewhat unsettling thought. Just because a case is officially closed or a lead is officially exhausted doesn't mean the whole truth is out. It just means the current leadership is satisfied with the answers they have.
Exactly. An investigation is defined as much by the leadership's will to see the truth or a particular version of the truth as it is by the evidence on the table.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive. This was a heavy one, but a really important one. We hope it helped you decode what is actually happening in federal law enforcement right now.
Keep asking questions, everyone. The story is never really over.
And keep digging. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.